Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the premiere episode of Industry Leaders Talk presented by The Diplomatist. My name is Kanchi Batra. With this, we are initiating a new series of one-on-one interaction with captains of industry, CEOs, heads of international business, and industry experts. In this industry focused series in an E format, we will explore a range of perspectives on today's business demands. We will ask business leaders from an array of industries how they are shaping their companies to meet the challenges of the future. A wide range of industry experts will discuss trends, evolution, and direction in which their respective industry is heading. In the next 30 minutes, you will learn about the industrial revolution of Africa from our expert, who will be later introduced by the chair. And now it is time for me to introduce today's presenter. She's someone we all know and admire, Ambassador Manju Seth. She is a career diplomat, retired from the Indian Foreign Service in 2014, a former ambassador and consul general of India. Her last assignment was as ambassador of India to Madagascar and Comoros. She has an extensive experience in India and abroad in dealing with diverse issues related to international relations, governance, policy matters, administration, publicity, media, protocol, culture, economic and commercial matters. She is an advisor for international collaboration with Organization for Diaspora Initiatives, that is ODI, and an advisor with Ambra Foundation, which works on women empowerment issues. Madam Chair, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Now, for all the participants, it is our hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity and come up with valuable feedback and suggestions that will be beneficial for our respective regions. We will have the opportunity to, you will have the opportunity to send questions to today's presenter by typing your questions in the Q&A box. And a recorded version of the discussion will also be available soon. And you all can see we are already live on Facebook. Now, with that, I will turn it over to Madam Chair. Over to you, Ambassador Seth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me wish all of you namaskar and good afternoon. And I think Professor Edgar's Excellency, I think we have to say good morning to you. What time is it over there?
About 10:30 in the morning.
10:30. So good morning to you. It's a pleasure to have you here this afternoon, this morning, on this very special new series, and with your great expertise in business matters, and of course in Africa and other countries, you know, Europe and Asia and India even. So it is really very fortunate for all our viewers, I'm sure, for all the viewers here. They would really benefit from your ideas and your perspective. And before we proceed further, I would just like to read out your biodata, which is so impressive. It's very long, so I will not be, reading the whole thing, but it's really very impressive. And he's one of the leading authorities on African matters and in Africa. So His Excellency Professor Dr. Ambassador Tal Edgars, QC, is a global multi-award winning, well-known business authority, mentor, chess player, erudite speaker of note, diplomat, and a cutting-edge thinker with an outstanding record in planning, managing, and executing highly successful private and public sector initiatives in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia. He has an academic, diplomatic, and international civil service background with a global inclination and provides quite extensive domestic best practices in Africa. He is Africa's leading authority and informed voice on knowledge of foreign policy community, growth and competitiveness practice, complex negotiations, strategic foresight, government affairs, entrepreneurship, investment policies, brand strategy. And also, he's an expert on how countries and businesses can be active participants in their own development. And he has been advising multifarious governments, multifarious companies across the world on how to do business with and in Africa, and how to, the other way around, how Africa can also have mutual partnerships, outside. And he has been a voice for Africa. and he's currently the chairman of GBSH Consult Group Worldwide. And it is in this context that today's subject, Industrial Revolution of Africa towards the Africa we deserve. So he will be talking on this particular topic, and it is something which is very, very relevant. And as the world evolves and as it's emerging from this COVID pandemic, which has, sort of ruined economies, has brought GDP's growth to a minimal, and it has upset, everything. And it is only because of the IT and the interconnectedness that we have that we are even able to interact like this. Otherwise, the pandemic has put connectivity to travel, to face-to-face meetings, and it has become something which the whole world is grappling with. Some countries have emerged or are in the process of emerging out, but many other countries are still in a bad way. And so it is important that it's a very opportune sort of subject for today, the Industrial Revolution. And in this context, I would just like to mention that when we talk of the Industrial Revolution today, we are really talking about the Industrial Revolution 4. And when we talk of the Industrial Revolution 4, it is about the second wave of the internet. The first one, as you're all are aware, was the one powered by steam. Then the second Industrial Revolution was powered by electricity. The third Industrial Revolution was powered by the internet and connectivity and mobile and the computers and everything and telecommunications. And now this is the current wave of internet, where it has become revolutionary, really. And so it is something which all countries should be looking to adapt and to sort of benefit from, in addition to the previous benefits that accrued from the previous industrial revolution. But since we can benefit from from hindsight and from the experience of others, we can have a combination of the earlier the technologies which have already in existence and can sort of harness and use for our benefit today, along with the new IR Industrial Revolution, or the Industrial Revolution 4, the technologies which are coming in today, the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the sheer revolution that is taking place on the internet. And if we can adapt those along with the previous technologies and come up with an industrial revolution which is beneficial for our people, lifts people out of poverty, creates jobs, and is sustainable. I think that I feel it is, Africa is poised, to benefit from all this. And I think if the right mix of technologies is taken, and one of the things that Professor Edgars, I think, is going to address is whether there should be a Silicon Valley in Africa. Absolutely, I think Africa and everywhere we need these Silicon Valleys. So there's innovation taking place. There's new technologies being adapted for everyone to benefit from, and creating jobs, creating connectivity, creating even without actually commuting yourself, you can do huge business. The e-business and e-commerce businesses that are going around the world, which are being, which know no borders, have created a new model of doing business. And Africa, as it grows, as its the market is growing, it's a huge market. It's even, it's expected to, be already 1/5 of, the world, and expected to grow even more in the next few years. And so it's going, and GDP is growing very, very quickly. The consumption market is increasing. And so the urban consumer is increasing in Africa. And so it is an opportune moment for companies to tie up, to enter Africa, tie up to set up joint ventures, set up manufacturing, but taking in taking up elements of the fourth industrial revolution, which will be a win-win situation for everybody. So without further ado, I will now invite His Excellency Professor Dr. Ambassador Tal Edgars to kindly make his intervention. Thank you so much, Professor Edgars.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, first of all, just applaud the diplomatist for this particular premier takeoff to talk to industry experts. I think it's important that more than ever, COVID created a digital divide for us to share the knowledge that we have, a universal consciousness that was important. And more than ever, Madam Chair, Ambassador Manju, it's not the first time we're on these sessions, but seeing you ever well and able gives me the light to know that I am sitting in good company. You have mentioned quite a bit of things, and rather than go to where exactly my mind was going, I want permit me to perhaps pay more attention to the arguments that you raised. We are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, but the fourth industrial revolution for who exactly? Now, two common terminologies are used when you talk about industrial revolution is globalization and development. So I'm going to maybe pose a bit of slightly vexing aphorisms so that we can appreciate if that globalization is the one we're looking for, yes, or is that the development we're looking for. So here goes. An example of headlines that reeked 3 decades ago about an English princess with a Welsh title leaving a French hotel with an Egyptian companion who has supplanted a Pakistani. They get into a German car with a Dutch engine that is driven by a Belgian chauffeur full of Scottish whiskey. They are then chased by Italian paparazzi on Japanese-built scooters and motorbikes into a Swiss-built churn tunnel where they crash. Their rescue is briefly attempted by an American doctor using Brazilian medicine, and the whole story is told to you here in South Africa by me. That is a simple idea of what globalization looks like. Fourth Industrial Revolution would argue that's exactly what they're talking about. But maybe let me pay it back to what it looks like when it comes to Africa, right? I'm reminded of the story of a Senegalese who in the morning of salam made in China, comes out of his woven sheets made in India, puts on his clothes made in Bangladesh, drinks his Spanish orange juice, puts French milk in his coffee produced in Brazil, all brought from Auchan, a French MNC. He jumps into his Japanese car to get a Total gas station. He refuels and takes his Korean Samsung phone made in Taiwan and pays with orange money. At noon, he leaves his office in Morocco and then goes to the Moroccan bank and joins his friend who's smoking American cigarettes. They eat a tiap, which is Cambodian rice, and without spending a dime that will stay in the country, they debate as to why there's no work and money in Senegal. Now, with both references, what COVID simply did was to disrupt an entire supply chain for us to ask a question, and it is exactly what I'm going to keep on putting out. And I hope with the 30 minutes that I have, I might be able to put some intellectual discourse to it. Is it an Africa we want or an Africa we deserve, right? Now, the mental map of Africa has always been interesting. We are soon to be the fastest urbanizing region in the world. We already have many cities with more than 1 million inhabitants, which is more than North America and more than 80% of population growth over the next 2 decades. We have a median age of around 20. That has got the largest youth population. The number of smartphone connections was forecast to double from 315 million in 2015 to 636 million in 2012. Twice the projected number in North America and not far from the total in Europe. So when we talk about infrastructure, when we talk about digitalization, Africa seems to be not far from it. But what don't we understand? Why is it not happening? Why is it that at the same rate that I speak of these things, if I'm getting a flight from, take a case in point, if I took a bike from a place like Cape Town, and I decided to travel right across Africa, all the way to the north, which should be in Egypt, it is actually going to take me 6 months. We do not have the infrastructure to be able to do that. We have bent our entire infrastructure on an opportunity that we have not seen to create a local supply chain. And perhaps somebody would ask, is the local supply chain worth anything at all? Africa is synonymously seen with poverty. So when people speak Africa, we speak poverty. When people speak Africa, we see the little child crying for $2, Save a Child concert that has to go on with it, who are poor, which the poverty levels fell from 56% in 1990 to 43% in 2012, according to the World Bank. The adult literacy rates have climbed by 10 points since 1990, 63%, still low, but rapidly improving. That means we've got more people just trying to reskill a whole new urban population, as you spoke of. Africa is in the midst of a significant acceleration. The real GDP at an average annual rate of little over 2% during the 1980s and 1990s. But then it leaped ahead to 5.4% in 2000. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a probable $5.6 trillion in projected consumer and business spending by 2025, right? We're looking at 1.2 billion people with population expected to double by 2050. So we are talking real volumes, but not real jobs. We are talking real volumes, but not real infrastructure. For us to urbanize and really push Africa to where it needs to go, it means that between 2010 and 2015, Africa's working population, age population, increased by 14 percentage points, which compared with 9 percentage points in India and only 1 percentage point in China. So we've got a ready and able population that can actually put in work into this. And so when we talk about the artificial intelligence, are we talking about reskilling the skilled? Are we talking about doing away with the skilled? The capital mobility between Africa to Europe has constantly been at a 12%, and then it projected itself to a mere 27% last year. More people are looking for jobs in Europe than they would wish to bring it back and create the infrastructure. So what's the true picture? More than 50 million African households, around 30% of the total, already have incomes above $5,000 a year. This might sound low, of course, if we're talking by Western standards, Madam Chair, but the stats indicate the numbers need to exceed 70 million households by 2025. That means we put money back into the homes, they put it back into the system, and it plugs back into infrastructure. But we're to pay Paul. Incidentally, if we were to use the purchasing power parity to African consumer trends, more than 70% of African households will have discretionary income by 2025. So now it's no longer a case of poverty. It's now a case of, do we have the right infrastructure? Do we have the right people in the right places? And I often say this, and I joke, and I make too many enemies when I say this, Madam Chair, but we might have the right people in the wrong place and the wrong people in the right place, right? Now, if I were to look at what is happening in African manufacturers, we could double their sales to intra-African markets by 2025, only if we opened our borders. What if we could? I had the similar argument, and I've listened quite much to what Dr. Shashi Tharoor was saying when he was speaking in Oxford, and he was able to rely to them that the entire textile industry, which thrived in the 1800s prior to the British having come in, was slowly spent down and run down to the point now India is trying to keep up with the West. Is that a simple argument that we are having? That our own local supply chains and our own local infrastructure has rapidly been run down to the point that it has solved no problems for us since the 1975s. Of course, using the flying geese paradigm, which the Chinese have used more than ever. Pocketbook, textbook diplomacy over actual local standards of building best practice. And I pose that to you, Madam Chair, because I realize that as we speak about this, you do have your own questions. But if we were to increase the manufacturing sector by 2025, it would mean we have increased the number of jobs by 11%. That then relates back that at least we will have denoted an entire 51% down by 11%. So we are not expanding. We are not creating those jobs. We are creating no industries. We are being bought out of industries. Madam Chair.
No, have you concluded?
Not at all. I was merely posing a question, Madam Chair, given that if I going on, then it would more like a speech, which is not the case.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with you that it has to be, local manufacturing, which is sustainable and beneficial. If you do take these new technologies and the AI and all that should be used benefiting the local manufacturing, making it more efficient, making the supply chains more efficient. So to use these new technologies to ramp up production and to ramp up as you mentioned, Africa trade, and also African trade with the outside other countries. it is important that you have to scale up your manufacturing, but which technology you're going to use for the manufacturing. Local technology, yes, but much of the local skills are gone. They're no longer even available in most countries for whatever reason, but in India, for instance, the weaving technology, the looms, so they have become, the handlooms have become something, they're being revived now, and they have been revived, but they need technology to get from the market, from the weavers to the market, and to find buyers. So those kind of things, issues where market to the, for the production line to the market, you make use of these new technologies, new tools available through, the internet, through artificial intelligence, blockchain, etc., including in agriculture as well. Agricultural products, everywhere, if we can use these, technologies, that I think would be a very good. And I wonder what your views are on marrying the two rather than, just say, leaving, isolating them, because it has to be sustainable too at the end of the day.
It has to be sustainable, Madam Chair, and I thank you for that. However, Africa trails the BRIC nations, and by that I mean it's way behind Brazil, Russia, India, and China in key measures, including electric power consumption per capita, rail density, and road density, right? So 600 million people in Africa lack access to electricity altogether. 600 million people. Africa's demand for electricity will quadruple between 2010 and 2040. By then, sub-Saharan Africa will require as much electricity as India and Latin America combined did in 2010. So far from just talking about the Industrial Revolution is, does government, utilities, and private sector manage the massive build-out and capacity needed to meet that demand? Then maybe let us look as a share of GDP. Infrastructure investment in Africa has remained at around 3.5% since 2000. This significantly will rise to 4.5% if Africa needs to close that infrastructure gap. How much are we talking about in dollar terms? Africa's annual investment in power infrastructure will need to rise from $33 billion to around $55 billion in 2025, while annual investment in transport infrastructure will increase from 20 billion in 2015 to 45 billion in 2025. So as much as we introduce the technology, there's a demand on it in terms of so that we can be able to meet the massive capacity build out. In 1975, only 25% of Africans lived in cities. By 2015, that share had risen to 40%. And by 2037, Africa will have shifted to a majority urban population. So now we are completely using up all the resources, if you look at it that way, right? The enormous India, China, Africa, and Southeast Asia markets hold the potential for significant expansion. More than roughly half of the global growth over the next 10 years will come from those three geographies: India, China, Africa, and Southeast Asia. But then the question becomes, how do we then create sustainable urbanization, accelerate infrastructure development, and deepen regional integration? You can answer those three questions and answer them without ideally having to have the foxpower of thinking that an analysis of having found a world large consumption could relate to it. Then perhaps we are even closer to talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Madam Chair.
So now I think we can, since we are running short of time, we will now I think do some question answers, and then you could also, as part of answering questions from the audience and some that we have already received, we could take this forward, if you agree.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So I'll now take up the questions. The first question is from Ingrid Skosana, Chief Executive, ICE Consulting. Africa's under 20 population is projected to be the continent's largest age cohort by 2070. So it is vital that young people are offered the tools to be successful in a digital-first economy. How can we make sure the youth benefit from the industrial revolution? Is the first question, if you would like to take that up.
On to that, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ingrid, for asking that question. The first idea is to understand that as much as we want to skill the youth, We must develop the jobs that allow this youth to be skilled. The education system, if we are talking about the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and we want gender diversity, then the first question should be, what kind of leadership do we need in order to be able to empower that gender inclusive kind of development? But we are putting the cart before the horse. And much of what we are doing is leaving a vacuum to address these issues in totality. That women in business in Africa and around the world have been seen as better entrepreneurs because they're returning the total investment of how much any VC has put in them. But I want to address that from the position of, is government ready? And this does not require an act of parliament. This does not require political goodwill. This requires administrative decision making. That if we are to create industries and to create jobs, what kind of potential of leaders should have that kind of thought process on the leadership level, so that then we can speak about how do we run with the innovation? Because a question that the Madam Chair you posed much earlier is, can Africa then be the new Silicon Valley? We can hardly be the Silicon Valley because we don't even have a sandbox policy. Ideas are stolen every day without any kind of law that has measured where does this stop. And until that point where we can literally look back and say that we do have a sandbox policy, this is the first time ever in history that Africa Court has called Facebook to come and answer questions in Africa in regards to how he does business in Africa. This is the first time. And until we start to ask for accountability in terms of leadership to boil down to the youth, then we will never get that answer given.
But education, as you said, is important and is really the key for getting people into, but what I was thinking is it's also entrepreneurship. We shouldn't just be looking at jobs. If these people are educated, they should be skilled enough to start their own, small enterprises, SMEs, MSMEs, because those are also the key drivers of growth anywhere. So if
they are the key drivers, Madam Chair, and sorry to cut you short, but it means no difference when the SMMEs and entrepreneurs are in the periphery of the economy. Until we can bring entrepreneurship into the epicenter of the economy, they are just another conversation, right? In South Africa, we have got 300,000 SMMEs that live on a constant till 600,000. Out of those, only 151,000 will scale down to about 21,000 that survive 5 years, and only those 20 that are open to opportunities. Where do the rest go?
I see.
Where they go? Do we know what the numbers are? And this is similar to every other country in Africa and around the world, that SMMEs have not created an enabling ecosystem for them to run just the same way we talk about the big corporate, or the same way we talk about government, or the same way we talk about big pharma. Entrepreneurship has been seen as a negation of a system. It is, if you can have a job, then you can start something. That is what entrepreneurship simply has been looked at as. Yet the entrepreneurs who are big enough to have been like the Amazons entrepreneurs, the eBays, and if you continuously look at them, because what surprises you and what you need to know is that 400 companies in Africa make over $1 billion on annual revenue. So it's not a matter. It's a matter of creating an ecosystem that allows these entrepreneurs to be part of the supply chain and be in the actual economy builder.
Yes, that's what governments actually need to do across the developing world, actually, to create an ecosystem that encourages them and that provides the the facilitation to scale up and to really contribute and be part of the economy and the GDP.
Indeed.
And so I'll go to the next question from Atul Kaushik, Chief of Party, the Asia Foundation, and industrialized Africa is good for the whole world. To what extent can India support the effort, given the aid fatigue in the continent? Now,
India and Africa are not known to each other over a day. We have been strategic partners over years. And where India is where Africa is. It's at a position where India is now deliberating. What is our position when we talk about soft power, right? Now, Africa will account for 1/5 of humanity by 2025, 2 times potential growth in manufacturing output by 2025. But half of those partners who we look at and we say, where does India come in? In 2015, companies spent $2.6 trillion building factories, buying equipment and services, and gearing up to serve customers across the continent. Stats indicate that annual spending by African business to reach $3.5 trillion by 2025. Where does India come in all that? Now, if we look at the percentage points of population and the working age population between India and Africa, we still stagnate around the same area. 2010-2015, Africa's working age population, 14 percentage points, compared to 9 percentage points in India. And so there's a shift of capital where you will find more Indian businesses are moving into Africa because they also have had a fast track of digitalization of a majority of rural to urban. And so we are trying to confine both sides and saying, what are we building in between here? Our manufacturing sectors are clearly the same. Out of every single place between Bangalore and Rajput, anywhere you look at, you'd see 200 factories. Out of those 200 factories, what can Africa learn? And where can we then find this expansion between the Brazil, India, Russia, and of course, Southeast Asia economies? So my answer to him is, the opportunities are there. The bigger question right now is, how do we merge what we think are the similarities enough to us to converge at a point of sustainable development?
And how much they will be beneficial for you, and how you can learn from the problems and mistakes, which have already, which people have already done in India, for instance, and how you can scale out of that. But also about the aid part, I think, development partnership that is there between India and Africa, maybe that also needs to be reprioritized, I think, from Africa's point of view, I think. But I don't know what your views are on that.
Well, I also believe that much of what we speak about is hidden in legal arrangements.
Right.
The technical arrangements, however, speak differently to it. African manufacturers will double their sales revenue by $326 billion US, but we can also increase our import revenue by $100 billion by 2025. So it's much of a give or take here. It's as we grow, who are the partners of growth? And so often or not, and I believe that we've spoken about this before, Ambassador Manju, that China has used a diplomacy while India has used a relationship development policy, where they has build a relationship with Africa. And if we build a relationship with Africa, then they will see us as better partners. Indeed, China still remains the #1 trading partner to Africa, but India definitely has got its feet in the same place. What is stopping India from taking its place as well, to the point that now we can develop, because both our countries were ridden short of a very big and glorious time when our industries were developing. So I think that's a question that still stays in. Do we confine ourselves to the legal arrangements, or do we then start to constitute what would be the technical arrangements to make it work?
Right. Okay. Another question that we have received from Ambassador Devnath Shaw, former Indian High Commissioner to Tanzania. He asks, the African Common Market, what has been the progress in implementation, and how does it help the industrialization of Africa?
So until this point, we have 54 countries expected to create and have created the world's largest free trade. And like I said, if we tie ourselves to the legal arrangements, the technical arrangements will become even more confusing.
Yes.
Now, we have had trade blocks before. This is nothing new. We have had trade policies before. This is nothing new. And I'm saying again that indeed the issue we are facing, and largely I will say this, and perhaps I might make more enemies after this, but sure enough, I will take my own bet on it. What sensitized Africa, what sensitized India to seek self-independence might have also been the issue that made us become independent against each other. All right. So now, rather than working as a continent, we are working as countries in a continent.
Yeah.
Trade will only remain on paper unless these administrative privileges are removed. We are trying to make this an act of parliament, and I can assure you, Africa is not short of capital. It is not short of people. It is not short of jobs, but we have created it so difficult because we create everything to be an act of parliament. We create everything to be about political goodwill. It is all administrative. If we wanted to get rid of the borders today, we could. It is an administrative issue. So I'll tell the ambassador, if we wanted to move a product from here to Tanzania from South Africa, it's an administrative issue. It doesn't need to go to parliament. The question is, how do we effective, how do we disrupt, and how do we make it sustainable? If we can answer those questions, rather than constantly looking at what position and play the government has in it, then perhaps we're even closer to understanding if the Africa Free Trade Agreement is actually going to come real.
Do you think these barriers, or these government, as you're saying, or administrative barriers which are all over within Africa, do you think if people, or do people have a voice, if the people come and say, or the business, like you say, the business community, the corporates of Africa come together and say this is important, and they put pressure on their respective governments that we need to, and especially if we want to have the industrial revolution we deserve and that we want, can they put pressure on all governments in Africa, or on the African Union as the overarching body, to bring in place this kind of legislation, should I say, or regulation, to do away with these intra-country, intra-Africa trading issues? Do you think it's possible?
Madam Chair, it is very possible. And I have been speaking in a constant movement. And if you have seen the curve around Africa, there's been a constant movement since the 1980s to speak on Africa rising, Africa on the growth curve, Africa development, etc., etc. And we speak of privatization, right? And quite largely, that is where the statement goes. Russia and Europe have finished, and they did that well over 30 years. So Russia and Europe privatized quite faster than anywhere else. The problem with Africa is we take a lot of time to do things. I hold the objective view that we have the capacity, we have the people, and we do have the capital. We don't need to be persuaded into trying to find a different way of how to do it. This is purely an administrative process. An act of parliament will not bring down the barriers of what is happening. They're already trading. In the US, it's trading. They did not need an act of Congress.
Yes.
It's an administrative process that out of all the states that we have, this is how we can do business. It costs us more to do business between an African and African country than it does between us and a US company. So where do the Africans look towards? We look towards the West, and we say that's where we are taking our products.
No, looking at the West is one aspect, but within the continent, within the African region, as you said, an act of parliament would it be required, if I got you right, to undo this? Is that what you were saying?
No, so an act of parliament is exactly what we don't require, because we have to separate the political process from the administrative process, and pretty much from decolonizing the powers of government. The structure of government in such a way that it should not hamper an ecosystem of business. It should be supportive of the ecosystem of business. So if we are decolonizing the structures of government, then we are saying that cascading that act of administrative process should be well within the departments of government and not a government parliamentary process. Parliament is to make law, not to oversee the ideals of a free trade agreement. And so we're wasting more time trying to figure out where the government's mind is and asking ourselves, what's the administrative process that is not in place?
So then we go to the next question. It is from Tebogo Kagoboko, Director, the Difference Makers Pty Limited. How much do you think art plays as a sector in Africa's industrial revolution? It's just very different, so I thought I'd just ask you.
Love question, Tebogo, and I appreciate that, because the arts has been kind of not formalized into an actual system where we can tell, we teach, and we show. Now, the arts in Africa has not been developed to the point that we see it as an actual business. And again, I'm going back to the point where does the government play, and then where does the business ecosystem play? If we were to bring the arts as an actual business and say that, and it is, because Hollywood is an actual business, it contributes to the GDP. Bollywood is an actual industry, right? It contributes and it grows the industry. In Africa, we have neglected that. We have not developed the arts as an actual export for ourselves, neither is it an import. We have instead exported our arts to outside Africa. And so I am not perplexed when I see the other Wakanda and they bring another version of it, that it will have half our African themes and songs, but it does not have own Africans here who started the idea and the revolution of arts being an actual constituted business that can be informed of what government is doing, informed of what the business community is doing, and it can be. Yes. But we have to actually look at things like that. We have taught it in schools, right? But half of these artists are not seen as serious folk. If you were to go to the bank now and you tell people I'm a dancer, I don't think you're getting a loan.
Yes.
Because I believe dance is an expression of art and it is an expression of industry. No, it is just an expression of art and you can do it as a hobby. So the honors are upon us. That how do we then come together collaboratively and as business show that this is what this is capable of? Because the population, government is also driven by people. Economies are driven by people. The fourth industrial revolution is driven by people. So it's people first. So this people thinking about, they then convince the government of the day that this is exactly an actual industry that has been neglected.
That's true. Another question from a diplomat in India, Omar Ibrahim. What will be the conditions to be created and the sectors to be promoted for the emergence of African industry? If you have any views on this.
So synonymously to that question would be what we have just, and I think when we're starting to talk about 11 million square miles of land, 3 times that of Europe, we're looking at agribusiness, right? And the agribusiness is going to take off. The African Bank insists that the only way Africa is going to be able to reach another trajectory is through agriculture, right? When we look at the $5.6 trillion in projected consumer and business spending by 2025, and you largely look at the output of manufacturing in 2025, then we're looking at large-based industries in manufacturing. We're talking steel, textile, cement, you name it. When we talk about 1.2 billion people with population expected to double by 2050, then you're looking at a very huge workforce. So we're talking about creating skills development. We're talking about 400 companies with annual revenues of 1 million, which are still projected to be rising in a $2.3 trillion market.
Right.
So the acceleration of Africa is twice the projected number they have ever seen in North America and not far from the total in Europe. But we are saying industries will be developed based on how much time we have taken to spend on the infrastructure gap to be able to accelerate it to the point it needs to get to. And often I have said this, that if I were to ride a bicycle with no wheels, yes, to you it is a bicycle, but it has no wheels, I will not move.
Absolutely.
So where we have the numbers, we have the people, but the infrastructure does not allow for us to accelerate at the same volume, at the same way that Europe has, because Africa is just in an advanced state of decay.
There's another question in the Q&A box that from Prasun Nagar, how to leverage digitalization and information technologies to drive competitiveness of African manufacturing and industrial development. And after this, we'll take just one more question and then conclude.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question that he's asking, and to project it much more, is to probably perhaps share the same as to what we're looking at in terms of internet, right? The internet access in Africa is by far low. I just spoke about 600 million people not having access to electricity. That in itself downplays how much we're losing. If we were to look at South Africa, we probably use 4 billion rand per day if we do power.
Oh.
Now, if we were to digitalize the entire economy and look at even things like fintech, the reason they're not going to work simultaneously overnight is because the infrastructure gap is not allowing for that to happen. The reason we're not going to trade 24 hours, South Africa is not a 24-hour economy, we're an 8-hour economy. And surprisingly, as that may look like, is the fact that past the 8 hours, then the country is asleep.
Right.
In the US, they 4-hour because the country leverages off the app build of its internet technology. We are still way behind in terms of how far technology has come, right? Technology is not used on an everyday basis. All we are having is more access to mobile phones, more access to 3G, 4G, 5G, but we're not answering the basics of which of these facilities do we need to accelerate. And for us to accelerate, then the pinpoints that I'm talking about are the first place that we will have to land on. Do we have enough electricity? Do we now have enough talent? Do we have enough skills? Do we have the right leadership to accept that this is where we need to go?
That's right.
Because sometimes leadership has always been part of the analog, if not to.
Absolutely.
If the minister believes that by all manner of reason, it is okay to remain in an analog phase, then it doesn't matter what ecosystem we are building. The governments have structured it in such a way that it has not accepted and developed it or consumed itself into the internet divide.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's one last question about how the pandemic is going to change the business environment in the world. And do you think the changes will be temporary or permanent? And, I suppose it doesn't say that whether it will affect the industrial revolution in Africa, but I would add that. I think that is going to affect the progress of the industrial revolution in Africa. This is from Professor Ajesh Anthony, St. Thomas College, Thrissur.
I'd want to challenge you, because when Madam Chair introduced me, she said that I do play chess. So I'm going to perhaps introduce my 5 chess move while answering you here. And the first is, COVID was a jolly good thing, a capital J, a capital G, and a capital T. One is that it made us rely on local supply chains, all right? So now every country around the world is asking, do we have enough manufacturing output for masks, ventilators, and whatever it is? So good questions are happening. I know that there are a lot of deaths that are happening, and that is sad. But then again, that is another industry that we are asking, do we have the right hospital equipment? Do we have the right things that are happening here? Do we have the right scenario planning? Do we have the right risk planning? So while COVID has tested us, I think COVID has tested the ability and the resilience of the business community to respond in kind. And if we were to respond in kind, then the last chess move, H5 to the queen, would be, we must accelerate our digitalization. We must accelerate our globalization. We must accelerate our development. There's nothing India, there's nothing Africa, there's nothing America, because when COVID hit, it hit all of us at the same time. So now we must start to wonder, if India can accelerate its digital and allow us to learn from that kind of skill set and accelerate ours, what is it that we in kind can share that will allow us then never to come back to this place? Because America had gone through it before when we talked about the swine flu. Why didn't we learn then? Because we never learn. We take too long to act. If we can act now and say that we are ready to pull down these barriers towards business, towards trade, towards education. The fact that Ambassador Manju and I are talking over this is brilliant, because this is exactly what COVID did. On a normal day, we would have been in the same conference room discussing certain matters. Yeah. But can it rest only on this? Can it rest with the idea that even governments can make it easy for us to make decisions based on the touch of a button? If that can happen, Professor, then I'm sure that my chess move is indeed a checkmate.
Yes, absolutely. And it's, post-COVID, if we learn also to scale up and to share health, infrastructure, health, health manufacturing, health-related manufacturing, as we have, suddenly woken up that, what we have is not sufficient, because it could just, go out of control, such pandemics, and how to guard against future pandemics, because pandemics will make any industrial revolution, just wash it away, any gains from it or any progress in it, any GDP growth will all get completely washed away. So how we can prevent future pandemics in some way, and also see that the effect is limited if you do, have pandemics or we are faced with a situation like this, unprecedented situation, and how to collaborate across countries and see how to, benefit from this as well, and have health and education, as you mentioned, as a very important part of the industrial revolution that, any country deserves, and of course that Africa deserves. So I think we have run out of time now. There's a question again from Atul Kaushik saying, while regional intergovernmental institutions have been built in Africa for quite some time now, what can be done by the global community for the entrepreneurs from Africa who have wares to sell abroad but do not have the wherewithal to do so? There are some examples from UNCTAD, ITC, but suggestions are welcome on bolstering such efforts.
So I see this as a question that perhaps is also asking about who do we involve in this, all right? And it has been often asked that when you show up for dinner, you must be careful if you will be the waiter or the diner. Our resources have come to a point where, just like India, we are rather careful to ask help from the West. We are rather careful to ask for help from other shores. And that is exactly what COVID did, because we do not have early detection signs. Our lagging behind in poverty, in joblessness, in resources, in power, in transport, in infrastructure needs to start asking us questions is, when did it stop? Now, if you look at the South-South corridor in Africa and things of the like, all of this have been built over the time, and they have completely run down than the first railways that I remember in 1960s and 1940s that were done by the Indians. Now, we are replacing value with cost. And that is a bigger conversation to have. That today in Africa, we would rather go cheaper than go with value. So the light train system in Ethiopia, the light train system in Kenya, the infrastructure roads that we see today within 3 days, where the pothole comes back on, or the rural development housing that we have, or the low-cost housing solutions we're looking. Are we looking for sustainability, or are we looking for voting applicability? Because leaders have learned that we are only going to fast-track infrastructure as a means to get to the office. But is it a means to sustain Africa? Because then the question will be, will this last us another 30 years? And if that is the conversation, then we do not need to bring the outside partners just yet, because we need to have these conversations here. We need to massage these thoughts amongst ourselves and say, what went wrong? What is really happening? And what can we do about it? Right from the top in terms of our leadership, down to the bottom of the gig working conditions, where you're having more miners but less mines owned by us. Within this listed exchange right now, half of the top 10 companies are owned by British.
Yes.
So we are not solving the problem. And like I said, it pays no hand to put a hand on the other than of it and say, then what do we do? If we were to do anything different, we must then start to involve these SMMEs that we have locally within the middle of the economy for them to find those solutions. Early detection signals have always been developed by SMMEs. The need for cell phone industry has been developed by SMMEs. Certain healthcare has been developed by SMMEs. And so we must not just look towards Big Pharma and say Big Pharma can answer our questions. So to that question, my answer would be, let us look towards ourselves. Let us build that narrative, that solutions that we seek must come from within. And then we are inviting partners to help us access a different level of codes of good practice, accelerate the growth, close the infrastructure gap. But let us first understand, do we know what is wrong with our countries?
Can I take 2 more questions? One is, can Africa act as a challenger in the 21st century? You partly answered that. This is by Dr. Mpaukolal Haukip, faculty of the Pondicherry University. Can Africa act as a challenger in the 21st century? And another answers, and I'll go to one last question.
I'll just take all questions at once.
Okay, and the last question, there are many more, but I will just finish up with this, by Pushkar Push, fellow scholar for School of Management. Nigeria has the biggest oil reserves in Africa, but it seems due to a lack of transparency and governance, Nigeria is suffering badly. What measures need to be taken to reform this? And does Nigeria's contribution matter in the African industrial revolution? And he's also put another question in the question answer box, which is interesting, saying that, how do you think the future would be like for Africa, with China, being the largest trading partner and over 10,000 companies, Chinese companies in Africa? So how do you think the future would be like for Africa? Can we consider this as a debt trap from China? So this I will conclude with, if I can answer these 3 questions, and I conclude after that.
All right. So I'll start with the first one, which was to mention, Madam Chair, that will Africa act, and how will Africa act within the 21st century? Without a doubt, and I will say that Africa will and is accelerating faster than you'd ever hope for it to. We are more than institutions within Africa. And if we were to take Rwanda as a case study, if we were to take Ghana, if we were to take South Africa, if we were to take Senegal, Nigeria, and the rest, then there is definitely proof in the pudding that Africa will play a very huge role in the 21st century. On to the next one about the Nigerian oil. And this is nothing new to the oil industry around the world. I might possibly have to use 2 kind of case studies here, but because of time, we don't have really a lot of time to really develop around the concept. So there's oil in Dubai, quite largely the same as what you're seeing in Nigeria. The problem we seek is leadership. It is leadership. If the leadership decides today that the oil reserves can be and will be able to be used for the sustainable development of the communities around them, then by all means it will be done, just the same way as mining. If you're going to use the communities to rehabilitate the minds enough for the communities around to develop, it can be done. It is not an act of parliament. It is all based on administrative process. And why do I? Because Dubai came from what it was a desert to what it looks like today based on administrative process. I am yet schedule of parliament that was tabled as to when Dubai should start having infrastructure development. And now where they're going to is they're asking, will oil be sustainable? So what are they looking for? They're looking for getting another form of way to sustain the city without having to completely get done with the oil.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
An administrative process one. When we talk about Africa in regards to India and China, sensitive as the topic might be, we are still at a point where we are asking ourselves is, why is the largest trading partner not giving the most value? And that is where I'd leave that question, because we'd need more time to unpack why, from the checkbook diplomacy to the relationship build up to the Red Fort higher independence declarations that we've had over the years, and it would take a bit of time. But please shoot it out and I'll answer it.
Yes, I agree. And I think we've really run out of time, but then we've crossed our time actually. But it has been really very enlightening and very excellent interaction with you, Ambassador Edgars, because I think this is a very important subject. And of course, a diplomatist has had the foresight, I should say, to come up with this new series, and where the nitty-gritties, and there are some questions in the question Q&A box asking for your advice and your help in for various products and how they can scale them up, or how they can source them, and or where they're put, and other such queries are there, which I think Kanchi will send to you. You can reply to them directly. And it has been really wonderful. And I must thank all our listeners and our viewers who have come up with such, all participants who have come up with such interesting questions. And I think it has been really a very, at least for me, very enlightening and a learning interaction. And I hope that we have many more similar interactions, by the diplomatists with other industry leaders. And Ambassador Edgars, I think I really need to thank you, because you have really cleared the air. And I think we are really going, Africa is going to, and I think if African governments are able to act as you have suggested, if all countries, because there's not one country, Africa is so many countries. And so if they can find an overarching and an overall formula, let me say, to get intra-Africa trade, get this new industrial revolution in place across borders, and put in the relevant infrastructure, I think, as you mentioned, it will be Africa's century. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
For having me, the diplomatist. More than ever, it is important for us to kind of collate all this universal consciousness and move to a position where we can actually share what is the real picture, because I think the mental picture is distorted about where Africa's position is. And to all people who logged in, all the people who asked the question, and to everybody who was probably listening, thank you so much. It has been more than a privilege, and I look forward to again being on this series. And like we say in Africa, Nkosi Sigeleli Africa, God bless Africa.
Thank you so much.